Another Day, Another Story. The Guns of August, by Barbara W. Tuchman, is a Pulitzer Prize-winning historical book published in 1962. The book focuses on the events leading up to the outbreak of World War I in August 1914. Tuchman provides a detailed and compelling narrative of the political, military, and social factors that led to the conflict and the first month of the war. Welcome to Tabo Eminent Channel. Summary. Tuchman's narrative begins in the summer of 1914, a few weeks before the war's outbreak. She describes the political landscape of Europe at that time, focusing on the complex network of alliances and treaties that bound various countries together. Tensions were rising, and there was a sense of inevitability about an impending conflict. The book discusses the key players involved in the decision-making process, including political leaders, military commanders, and diplomats. Tuchman explores the mindsets of these individuals and analyzes the choices they made, often based on flawed perceptions and miscalculations. She emphasizes the role of personalities and the human factor in shaping historical events. As the book progresses, Tuchman provides a detailed account of the first month of the war. She describes the initial military strategies, battles, and political developments. The book vividly portrays the chaos and confusion of the early days of the war, highlighting the challenges faced by military leaders on both sides. Tuchman also delves into the social and cultural aspects of the time, describing the attitudes of the general population and the soldiers who fought in the war. She illustrates how the optimism and enthusiasm that initially accompanied the war quickly turned into disillusionment and horror as the reality of modern warfare set in. The title, The Guns of August, refers to the belief held by many at the time that the war would be short-lived, and the soldiers would be home by Christmas. However, as the conflict dragged on, it became clear that the war would be long and devastating, leading to significant political, social, and economic changes in the countries involved. A funeral. In May 1910, the funeral of Edward VII of the United Kingdom drew the presence of 9 kings, one being Kaiser Wilhelm II of Germany. Wilhelm, or William, was Edward's nephew. The opening chapter begins and ends with a description of the royal funeral, and in between provides a discussion of the continent's political alliances and the diplomacy of royalty, all amidst the national rivalries, imperialism, and social Darwinism in the years leading up to the Great War, 1914 to 1918. Plans. Chapters 2 to 5 are grouped into a section called Plans. Addressed is pre-war military planning, as done by the major powers in Europe. Included are the German Schlieffen Plan, France's Offensive Plan 17, joint British and French arrangements, and Russia's approach to a future European war. Outbreak. Outbreak starts with a short introduction, which briefly mentions the event that triggered World War I. On June 28, 1914, in Sarajevo, Gavrilo Princip, a Serbian nationalist, assassinated the heir apparent to the throne of Austria-Hungary, the Archduke Franz Ferdinand, and his wife Sophie, Duchess of Hohenberg. European-wide diplomacy and military preparations during July are then referenced. Chapters 6 to 9 commence with August 1914. Discussed and probed are maneuvers by leading politicians, diplomatic affairs, and actions undertaken by various armies during the opening days of the war, August 1 to August 4. Covered are the Kaiser's hesitation, the struggle by Russia to ensure that its ally, France, would join in the war, France's attempts to win a guarantee from Britain of her involvement, and Germany's ultimatum to Belgium. Battle. The bulk of the remainder of the book, chapters 10 to 22, is essentially devoted to the battles and tactical planning on 2 fronts, the Western, chapters 11 to 14, 17, and 19 to 22, and the Eastern, chapters 15 and 16. However, Austria, and the Balkans, are omitted. Notes 1, chapters 10 and 18 are devoted to the war at sea. Intertwined in the narration are the adverse effects of the vanity of the various leaders and insubordination. Also addressed are some perceptions made among those in the rest of the world, including a critical interpretation of events that cemented various political views, such as Chapter 17. The short, Afterword, then reflects on events of August 1914. Mediterranean. Tuchman starts the "Battle" section by covering the search by Allied naval forces for the German battlecruiser Goeben in the Mediterranean, Chapter 10. The Goeben finally took refuge in the Dardanelles, waters of the then neutral Ottoman Empire. Such naval action set off diplomatic maneuvers, but the event precipitated Turkey's entry into the war on the side of Germany. The development worked to block Russian import-export via its year-round ports on the Black Sea. That, in turn, led to the disastrous Gallipoli campaign. Western Front. Chapters 11 to 14 cover the war in Western Europe. First discussed are the German invasion northeast of Belgium and the general Western Front, especially the situation in Alsace. Next, Tuchman describes the arrival in France of the British Expeditionary Force, Chapter 12. As they crossed the Belgian frontier, the German armies were engaged by the Belgian army in front of Liege, and in the east of France, by 5 French armies, and in the south of Belgium, by 4 British divisions, known as the British Expeditionary Force. The French were said to be laboring under the delusion that Gallic Ellen would be crucial in countering German attacks while the British fought hard at the Battle of Mons. In August, each side deployed its armed forces in order to effect its own strategies developed in advance of the war, discussed in plans. The French High Command had made incomplete allowances for dealing with the large-massed attack by the German army, which now came quickly bearing down on them. It was perhaps through the decisions of Charles Lanrizac, the French Fifth Army commander, who acted in a timely fashion before getting permission from Joseph Joffre, that the entire French line was eventually saved from envelopment and general collapse. Although his pleas were ignored, Lanrizac withdrew his forces at Charleroi from an untenable position and probable destruction, and he redeployed them more favorably. He was later relieved of command. The Battle of the Frontiers was brutal. The Belgian army was rushed against the German army, but the Allies were forced to retreat slowly under the German onslaught until the Germans were within 40 miles (64 kilometers) of Paris. The city was saved through the courage and verve of a semi-retired territorial general, Joseph Gallieni, who marshaled his limited resources and saved the day. The city was preparing for siege and possible complete destruction, and the government had fled south, when 2 divisions of reserve suddenly arrived and were rushed to the front by the city's fleet of 600 taxicabs. Tuchman cynically notes that Joffre later took complete credit for saving Paris and the French army after having the commander who ordered the tactical retreat, Lanrizac, relieved of duty, and the old commander and his former superior, Gallieni, pushed back into obscurity. Tuchman is also careful to point out that although many of Joffre's actions were shameful, when he was finally pushed into action, he showed great skill in guiding the hastily improvised counterblow that crashed into the invaders' flank. The Germans greatly contributed to their own undoing by outrunning their supply lines, pushing their infantry to the point of physical collapse and deviating from the original invasion plan, which called for the right flank to be protected from counterattack. At that stage of its offensive, the German army lacked the troops used by the siege of the fortress of Antwerp, held by the Belgian army. Both sides were plagued by poor communication and general staffs that were heavily invested with politics and sycophancy. Dire warnings from commanders in the field were ignored when they did not fit preconceived notions of quick victory at low cost. Russia and Germany. Only chapters 15 and 16 are devoted to the Eastern Front, and center on the Russian invasion of East Prussia and the German reaction to it, culminating in the Battle of Tannenberg, where the Russian advance was stopped, decisively. In the chapters, Tuchman covers the series of errors, faulty plans, poor communications, and poor logistics, which, among other things, decidedly helped the French in the West. For example, the Germans mistakenly transferred, from the West, 2 corps to defend against what the book refers to as the Russian steamroller. The great misery that developed on the Eastern Front is noted. Flames of Louvain. Woven into the text about the battles in Belgium are threads of fact that Allied governments would employ in the formation of the West's eventual opinion that Germany had been the aggressor nation against Belgium. Such facts and conclusions would be repeated for the duration of the war and greatly affect the future involvement of the United States. Also here in Chapter 17, The Flames of Louvain, Tuchman places a selection of German views from a variety of sources as to the aims and desires of Germany. She cites Thomas Mann as saying the goal was the establishment of the German idea in history, the enthronement of Kultur, the fulfillment of Germany's historical mission. She then conveys American reporter Irvin S. Cobb's account of an interview with a German scientist: Germany is for progress. German Kultur will enlighten the world, and after this war there will never be another. Yet further, a German businessman opines that the war will give Europe a new map, and Germany will be at the center of it, aims similar to the September Program. 3. Such outspoken menace worked to solidify opposition to Germany, caused George Bernard Shaw to become fed up at Prussian militarism, and H.G. Wells to condemn the German war god, and hope for an end to all armed conflict. Chapter 17's main focus is the German army's atrocities in Belgium, in particular against the historic university city of Louvain. Tuchman frames her remarks by describing the Schrecklichkeit, the German military's theory of terror. Accordingly, in a failed attempt to suppress the illegal Franc-Tireur, civilians shooting at German troops, hundreds of nearby citizens at several Belgian towns had been executed. Her accounts of the ferocity of such German army reprisals against the general population and of the willful burning of Louvain, such as its university library, make it obvious why the Western Allies might feel themselves justified to condemn Germany and Germans wholesale. Tuchman's book is widely praised for its meticulous research, engaging narrative, and insightful analysis. It remains a seminal work on the topic of World War I and is considered a classic in the field of military history. Thanks for watching.